stories and figures of Israel, Moses, Elijah, prophets and kings. Revelations of Jesus Christ from 1884 to 1950. The people of Israel's pilgrimage with Moses through the desert. Thus saith the Lord. In the first era, Moses was at the head of Israel in guiding them through the desert for 40 years to the land of Canaan. But from disobedience, lack of belief, and materialism, some blasphemed, others reneged, and yet others rose in rebellion. Moses, confronted with such a situation, told them with prudence and patience not to offend the supreme will, but to be humble and obedient before that Father, who, without considering their disobedience, had made manna fall from the sky, and water spring forth from the rocks. Moses had offered sufficient proof that the true God was with him, but the people wanted more evidence. The messenger, taking the multitudes to the slopes of Mount Sinai, called upon the power of Jehovah, and the Lord, hearing him, granted him great proofs and miraculous things. The people wanted to hear and to see the one to whom Moses listened, and the one whom he perceived through his faith. I manifested myself to those people in a cloud, and had them listen to my voice for hours and hours. But it was so potent that men felt themselves dying of fear. Their bodies shook, and their spirits trembled before that voice of justice. Then the people begged Moses to plead to Jehovah, not to speak any longer to his people, for they could no longer listen to him. They recognized that they were still too small to communicate directly with the Eternal One. Forge your spirit in the great combat of life, just as the people of Israel did in the desert. Do you know how great the desert is, which, with its harsh sun and burning sands, appears to have no end? Do you know what loneliness and silence are, and having to maintain vigilance because enemies watch? Truly, I tell you, it was there in the desert that the people knew the greatness it was to believe in God, and learn to love Him. What could that people hope for from the desert? Nonetheless, they had all: bread, water, a home in which to rest, and an oasis and sanctuary wherein to elevate their grateful spirits toward the Father and Creator. The struggle of Elijah for the true God. In the first era, Elijah came to earth and found that humanity was practicing idolatry and did not believe in God. The world was being governed by kings and priests, and both had departed from the obedience to divine laws and were guiding their people along paths of confusion and falsehood. They had erected altars to different gods which they worshipped. Elijah appeared in that time and spoke to them with words of justice, telling mankind, "Open your eyes and see that you have disrespected the law of the Lord. You have forgotten the example of his messengers, and have fallen into a worship which is unworthy of the living and powerful God. It is necessary that you awaken, that you see and recognize him. Eliminate your idolatry, and lift your eyes above every figure with which you have represented him." Elijah heard my voice, which said to him, "Depart from the wicked people of that nation. Tell them that rain will not fall for a long time, not until you order it so in my name." And Elijah said, "It will not rain until my Lord appoints the hour, and my voice orders it." And thus saying, he departed. From that day forth, the land was dry. Many normally rainy seasons passed without rain. There were no signs of water in the sky. The fields felt the drought. The cattle began to perish. Men unsuccessfully dug into the earth, looking for water to quench their thirst. Rivers dried up. Overcome by the rays of the red-hot sun, the grass withered, and men cried out to their gods, asking for rain to return to them, in order to sow and harvest the seed which fed them. Elijah had departed by divine mandate. He prayed and awaited the will of his Lord. Men and women began to leave their lands in search of new places which did not lack water. Wherever one looked, there were caravans, and all the land was dry. Years went by, and one day when Elijah elevated his spirit to the Father, he heard his voice saying, "Seek out the king, and when I give you the sign, the waters once again will fall over the land." Filled with obedience, Elijah humbly went before the king of that nation and showed his power before the worshippers of the false gods. After that, he spoke about the Father and of his power. Then the signs appeared. Lightning, thunder, and fire were seen in the sky, followed by an abundance of rain. Once again the fields became green, and the trees were filled with fruit. There was abundance of many things on earth. Faced with this proof, the people awakened and remembered their father, who called and warned them through Elijah. The 12 tribes of Israel. Do not believe that prophets, forerunners, and spirits of light have existed only in the bosom of the people of Israel. I have sent some of these to other peoples as well, but men took them as gods, not as envoys, and under their teachings created religions and cults. The people of Israel did not understand the mission they had with the other peoples, and slept in a bed of blessings and complacency. The Father had formed them as a perfect family, in which one tribe had the mission of defending the people and maintaining peace. Another worked the earth, and another were fishermen and navigators. To yet another was entrusted spiritual worship, and so on. Each one of the 12 tribes that made up the people carried out a different mission that together served as an example of harmony. And truly, I say to you, the spiritual gifts that you possessed in those first times, you still have them. The prophets and first kings of Israel. The prophets spoke with great truth. They came to earth almost always in times of great confusion and straying, admonishing the peoples, inviting them to repentance and to make amends, proclaiming great trials of justice if they did not turn back to the good, and other times predicting blessings for observation and obedience to the divine law. But what those prophets spoke of was an exhortation toward the practicing of good, justice, and respect for one another. They did not come revealing the life of the Spirit, its destiny and evolution. Not even Moses himself, who I chose to be made my representative, and through whose channel I gave the law for all time, spoke of the spiritual life. The law of the Father encompasses wisdom and justice, teaches men to live in peace, to love and respect one another, and make yourselves worthy before me as men. But Moses did not show humanity that which is beyond the threshold of bodily death, nor what the restitution of the disobedient spirits is, or the prize for those that are prudent and jealous of their mission. Later, David reigned, full of gifts and inspiration, and in his moments of elevation, in his ecstasy, he heard the hymns and spiritual songs with which he formed the psalms to invite the people of Israel to pray and give the best offerings of their hearts in tribute to the Lord. Yet David, with all his love and inspiration, could not reveal to the people the marvelous existence of the spirits, nor their evolution or their goals. And again Solomon, who succeeded him in his reign, and who also showed the great gifts of wisdom and power that had been given to him, and for which he was loved and admired, and whose counsel, judgments, and proverbs are still remembered today. If his people had approached him to ask, "How is the spiritual life? What is beyond death? What is the Spirit? Solomon, with all his wisdom, could not have answered.